Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar that we've prepared to explain a little bit more about what we're doing within INSTAR. INSTAR is an initiative that we are spearheading. So we are Blue Specs, we are the project coordinators, and we have a wonderful consortium of partners. I won't list them all. We can, you'll be meeting a lot of them during this call. But essentially what we aim to do is to support the European digital partnerships with like-minded partners across the world to really work on the standardization of advanced technologies. And then again, we will be sharing more details on exactly what those technologies are and who those like-minded countries are in a few minutes. So what I'd like to do is perhaps just, we have very little time, just over an hour. And what we're going to be doing is essentially, first of all, hearing from the European Commission directly about their priorities, about our priorities really, and future expectations in relation to standardization. Our colleague Demir, who has made it here today from his deathbed, about where we are with the standardization roadmaps. And then we will have the privilege of hearing from a range of experts, Gianluca, Antonio, Paolo, and Stefan, about the European task forces, a little bit more detail, and the Digital Partnerships in Action initiative as well. And finally, we will be just summarizing some of the key actions that we've agreed throughout this hour that we have before us, and you know, how you can contribute, how you can also take part. We'd love to hear from you. So perhaps just going in a little bit more detail about what INSTAR is. Our geographical scope is USA, Canada, Singapore, Taiwan, Japan, the Republic of Korea, and Australia. And in terms of the technologies that we're focusing on, and focusing is probably a little bit of a misnomer here, but we're really looking at standardization in AI, data, cybersecurity and EID, IoT and edge computing, 5G and 6G, and quantum. So as you can see, you know, the really small area of technological scope there. Key actions. We are here to develop a common vision and roadmap with these like-minded partners to essentially promote ICT standards in those areas in target foundational technologies. To do this, we need to really identify those partners in those countries and you know, across, of course, the whole of Europe, to really identify what it is that we want to do and with whom. And we will provide some frameworks and some information, studies and analyses of where the state of the art is in standardization on those technologies. And a final thing that we're doing also to support all of this work is to really understand how these agreements are affecting our trade with these like-minded partners. Are we seeing that standardization being a support to our trading agreements? Because ultimately we need these standards to support the growth of our industry and to really underpin or make sure that the values, the way that we see that these technologies should be integrated in the way that we live and work, is taken up, not just in these countries, but even more globally. So consortium, could you just come back a little one, please? I think we've lost the, thank you very much. So the consortium, we're leading, but we have, you know, wonderful partners from Fraunhofer, Fortis, AOTI, Trialog, TU Delft, Trust IT and Compla, NC, SRD, and of course AIT. And I haven't given you the full name of those because we'd be here probably for half the hour. But at this point, I'd like to please invite Carlos Rodriguez from DG Connect to the stage and to share his words with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tania, for the introduction and for kindly introducing me. So Yes, thank you for the slide. So I'm Carlos Lopez. I'm a policy officer working at DigiConnect in the ICT standardization team, and also project officer of INSTAR for this project. So maybe we can go to the next slide. I prepared a couple of slides to give a bit of this context. So as Tanya mentioned, it's all about international cooperation with our like-minded partners in STAR. So a bit more in general, you know that the European Commission issued a European standardization strategy in 2022. It consists of 5 pillars, but here we are going to focus on one, which is mainly to try to promote the European leadership in global standardization. And in the digital sector, we are aware that the digital sector has some particularities, like the fast pace of technology is advancing very fast. So standardization also needs to happen very fast, and also to be a leader in digital technologies. You know that now there is a lot of, let's say, new technologies that are coming. There is a new industry players that they want to lead on this technology. So it's important to have global standards, or to participate in global standards, and to be to set the standards, or to be relevant in the standard development process is part of our ambitions in the EU. And why? Mainly for 2 reasons. This will help us to boost the competitiveness of our industry, which is also one of the main, let's say, highlights of the Draghi report that was published recently, and not less important, to promote European values and interests. There are a number of challenges for let's say, for this, notably the geopolitical situation, the geopolitical flavor that standards are taking in the last times. There is also a lot of pressure to develop a standard that will support our regulatory acquis in the digital domain, AI Act, Cyber Resilience Act, Electronic Identity, Data Act, etc. So this is another challenge, and also indeed the reduced influence that Europe has on digital standardization. And our goal is basically to try to, on one side, to mobilize more European experts to participate in standardization, because this is contribution driven and consensus based, and also importance of cooperating well with our international partners. And I will give you the next slide, please. A bit of a very high level overview of the digital partnerships. You have there in the bottom of the slide a link to have a bit more information about those. But these are instruments that the European Union and its partners are using to strengthen connectivity across the world. And we are, let's say, using as our guide the digital compass. And up to date, we have signed digital partnerships with 4 like-minded partners, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Singapore, and Canada. And we also have similar instruments, but where there is a trade dimension as well, in the Trade and Technology Councils with the United States and with India. You can see there the focus areas is all about digital, as the name says. So you see there this is a non-exhaustive list, and it actually is the 6 work streams of INSTAR that Tanya mentioned before. So you go to the next slide. To support these dialogues, or this cooperation with our international partners, we have several instruments, and one of them is going to be the focus of today's webinar, is INSTAR, that Tanya explained before. And we have other instruments, like, for instance, Indico Global, which has a different geographical scope, but the bottom line is the same: is to foster collaboration between the EU and partner countries on ICT standardization, and to build bridges between different partners. And we also have two long-standing initiatives, the SSA and SSEC, so seconded European standardization experts in India and China, that are also supporting our efforts in these two countries. So with this, I'm going to stop. So thank you very much for organizing this webinar to INSTAR, and many thanks to all the people that are listening to us. And yeah, over back to you, Tanya, and thank you very much, and enjoy the webinar. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and apologies for missing out your middle surname, Carlos Lopez Rodriguez. I think I introduced you as Carlos Rodriguez. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So, Damir, nice to see you, and I'm glad you could make it. I think it's over to you now. Very impressed that you actually were able to recover from where you were yesterday. So, thank you very much. Damir, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry. Thanks, Tanya. I think you can still hear that I'm not, let's say, as I used to be, but I will try to give my best to lead you through the couple of slides about the INSTAR task forces and roadmaps. So this basically builds on what Tanya already mentioned overall about the project, and Carlos about the background where the project fits in the overall Commission strategies. And then through the task forces and roadmaps, we try to basically, let's say, operationalize this work, coming to the roadmaps which would define the priorities identified by the experts, let's say from the European side. And then, of course, the idea is to bring those priorities defined through those roadmaps to our international partners that are in the scope of the project. And then to discuss with them what could be, let's say, the overlaps, complementarities, and agreed priorities, and then to see how this can be brought further to the international standardization. So basically within the project, we have two types of the task forces that we established. First is what we call the European task force, when we have a set of experts, usually 10 to 15 experts per each of the technological areas covered by the project, which basically work together, going through the work in the standardization organizations, what is in the European ICT rolling plan, what is within European funded projects, and also what comes out from the European legislation, as Carlos mentioned, so AI Act, Data Act, Cybersecurity Act, EID, and so on, and try to identify what are the work items and priorities of interest, which then we want to bring, and of course this will be defined within the roadmap for each of the technological areas. And then we plan to bring this to the so-called international task forces, which we want to form with each of those 7 partners that are in the scope of the project, and for all 6 technological areas, and then discuss with them what is, let's say, priority from their side, how they see about what we identified as the priorities, and then if we agree, sorry, if we agree on a common roadmap with them, to see how then this common roadmap can be, let's say, put forward in the international standardization organizations. This is basically just to show you the European task forces. So they go, as I mentioned, around 6 technological areas, and you can see which of the project partners are leading each of them and what is kind of within the scope of each of the task force. And then on the next one is just to show you a bit of the very short overview on the progress of the task forces. So basically we are now in the moment when we are defining the first draft of the roadmap. We're pretty much, I would say, done with all of it. A bit more work on the 5G, 6G area, but this is also progressing quite well, and that will be soon done. And then when this is finalized, we will then basically go to the international task forces, where you see basically that we have a sort of the 2-stage strategy to support digital partnerships and TTCs, as mentioned by Carlos. We have, let's say, the short-term work, which will be more bilateral, and that will be also linked to the ongoing discussions within digital partnerships, TTCs, and trade agreements. And then also our direct, let's say, work with the partners in the international task forces, which of course will be linked to the discussion related to the digital partnerships, TTCs and TAs. And I think it's very important to mention, we are not working on any concrete standardization work item. And we are also not working on, let's say, what will happen next with identified priorities in international standardization organizations, nor we are duplicating any existing work. It's actually to complement the existing work, to identify some maybe also forward-looking priorities, and then discuss it with international partners to see how we can kind of work together on them in international standardization process. And this is just the status on the task forces. So basically you see the 7 partners we are working with at the moment, actually 6 at the moment. And basically we identify the partners in each of them with whom we can get in touch. We did that, set up, of course, the meetings with them, exchanged the MOU or signed MOU. At the moment we have it with Korea, but we have ongoing discussions with Canada, with Japan, Australia, and the US. So I think that was pretty much from my side, just as an introduction. And then, of course, later you will see within the panel what the colleagues will give you a bit more details about the roadmaps and the content there. Then you can engage in more, I would say, concrete discussions with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damir. And as our colleague Hassan has said in the chat, if you do have questions, please do ask them in the Q&A section of this webinar. Most of you, I imagine, are quite familiar with Zoom, but if not, it's in the bottom ribbon. And also, please do feel free to introduce yourselves, as Luigi said, because it'd be lovely to hear about what you're doing in standardization. And just to get everyone to really understand who's around the table. We still have people joining us as we progress, but now over to Ruth and to manage the panel. Thank you very much.
And maybe Ruth, if I can just before you step in, before you start, just to step in with that exact point, Tanya, who's here today. So from the registrants we have, we're expecting the majority to come from Germany, Italy, Spain, but you will see we have 20% of registered people are joining us from the members of the European task forces. So delighted to have that participation as well. And by domains, we're most strongly represented by 5G and 6G and AI experts, but also people have joined us here today from industry, from other EU-funded projects, and also a small amount from SDOs and from policies as well. So looking forward to stimulating discussion, Ruth, for your panel, just to give you that background as well.
Thank you, Brendan. So I would ask, first of all the speakers to open their video if possible. So Paolo, Gianluca, Antonio, and Stefan. And so hi, everybody again. So we have set a panel for around 50 minutes. And let me start. So the purpose is, as Damir said before, to give you an overview on the work that is being done in some of the European task forces in INSTAR. So I'm going to start just quickly to present you the speakers. So we have Gianluca Misuraka, who is here representing so he's the coordinator of the Digital Partnership in Action. We have Antonio Kung from Trialogue, background on cyber-physical systems and IoT. And here he's representing the Cloud Edge IoT task force led by IoTI. Paolo Campegiani, Senior Project Manager at BIT4ID, so he's representing the European Task Force on Cybersecurity, EID. And we have Stefan Weisgerber from DIN, I hope, even though I cannot see him. So, but if Stefan is here, so we were expecting him to participate. So he's heading the digital platforms in DIN. Okay, so I would start with a quick round. So what we are going to do is to have a quick round where I would ask each of the speakers to present briefly the ETF, the initial actions that are being taken. So to explain to everybody also, the ETFs have been set over the last 6 to 9 months. And as Damir has explained, there is an initial or almost complete, in some of the cases, road mapping draft for priorities towards the alignment in standardization. So I would ask then Antonio, maybe by this order, to help Gianluca and Paolo to speak, if possible, about your role as member of the respective ETF, view on the key priorities that you are setting up, and let's say, what are the next steps? I see some hands raised also. I would appreciate if you could write them in the chat, but we will take them, okay? So as soon as we have this first round of talks, I will do my best to follow the questions, and Luigi is helping so that we can bring them to the speakers. So Antonio, go ahead.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Antonio Kung speaking from Trilog. I'm also a member of AIoTI, and AIoTI is about IoT, digital twin, and this is the reason why I'm a part of this this task force. Okay. My background is actually that I am also fully involved in standardization. I just want to mention that the biggest one is what SC41 and ISO IEC JTC1. IoT and digital twins, but I also work on cybersecurity and privacy, and SC27 and AI SC42. So what is interesting in IoT and digital twin SC41, it is a system and architecture based, let's say, committee, and where we integrate things, okay? And this is the value we try to bring, at least from Europe, but also the other partners, regions have the same, let's say, approach. And this is what we're trying to bring. In particular, in Europe, we have launched those actions, funding, developments on EU cloud IoT, edge IoT, and this what we call the computing continuum. And we hope to create synergy, and of course with some kind of European leadership there.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. So Gianluca?
Hello, everyone. So yes, I'm Gianluca Misuraka, and I'm here as a coordinator or team leader of the Digital Partnerships in Action. That is a project funded by the European Commission, the Service for Foreign Policy Instruments, to support the Commission services, and in particular DG Connect and the delegations in specific like-minded countries to strengthen the cooperation on the digital partnerships that has been engaged in particular with Japan, Republic of Korea, and Singapore. There is also now with Canada, but our project for the moment focus only on these 3 countries. So we started about a year ago, and we are supporting in particular the EU delegations in specific, let's say, activities on the whole range of digital partnerships topics that go from artificial intelligence to cybersecurity, quantum, semiconductors, digital identity, data, mentioned by the colleagues before. I'm not specifically an expert on standardization, but clearly standardization is, as it was clearly anticipated, part of the broader, let's say, technology diplomacy endeavor that the European Union, member states, and all the supporting actions are like trying to facilitate. I think it's very important and timely. I think it was also mentioned in the chat by Silvana that within the cyber resilience debate and the regulatory frameworks that have been established in Europe, starting from artificial intelligence and data governance, but not only the standardization would be, let's say, a crucial element of this discussion. Before that, and maybe if we go into the discussion of experiences, I've been leading another similar initiative, the International Outreach for Human-Centric Artificial Intelligence, in short, intouchai.eu, that was also promoting the European approach to human-centric artificial intelligence. And maybe I can give you some insights from what we've done in the recent past.
Thank you, Gianluca. We will go there. That would be actually, that is important to us also. So I would pass the token to Paolo. Same questions, Paolo, role as member in the ETF, view on current priorities that you guys are drafting, and also if you have already some initial steps towards the alignment.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. So I'm Paolo Campegiani. I'm the head of innovation of Bit4ID and Amirial. They are, Amirial is a very big, one of the biggest European trust service provider, which means that we deal a lot with digital identity, digital signature, and this kind of things. My contribution to the standardization world lies primarily in the ISO Committee on Blockchain and Distributed Ledgers, when I also wrote a technical report. I coordinated the effort about the technical report on digital identity and blockchain. And I'm happy to announce you that last week or so in Sydney, we had the TC307, this is the name of the group, meeting, the plenary, and we decided to start a new standard. And this is one of the priorities to answer one of your questions, about how to create interoperable digital wallets. You know that now the European Union has put a lot of energy in the revision of the European regulation on digital identity. One of the things, the new things that we see in the future, in the near future, is about this European digital identity wallet. And in ISO, we decided to tackle this problem in order to create interoperability between this wallet that is going to be released to everyone of us in, let's say, a couple of years, so not so much in the future, and other wallets that could develop in other countries in the world. Apart from ISO, I also work in the ESI committee, which is about essentially the standardization of trust services in Europe, and also on the SENELEC, two committees of SENELEC. One is about blockchain distributed ledger again. The other that I like to cite, I think is not one of the fields that is covered by INSTAR, but I think it's relevant about the digital product passport. You know that, again, 2-3 years from now, when every one of us who has to buy some product for specific classes of product, you could get some information about the product, like how it has been developed, how it's possible to recycle it, how it's possible to reuse it. We are doing the standardization work in SENELEC, and I think that in the next few years, this could be an important point of cooperation. But focusing a bit more on cybersecurity electronic ID task force, which I'm a member of in the context of the INSTAR project. I think that there are two priorities, essentially. One, I told you about the European Digital Network. The other is about the Cybersecurity Resilience Act. This will be this act will have a profound impact on the way digital products, all products that contain digital components, software, just to be clear, will be developed in the future. And this will have a strong impact on how developers, manufacturers of these products, even when they're outside of Europe, they have to deal with our regulation approaches to cybersecurity, which is absolutely, it's clear for us, a critical point in the current geopolitical context. What we've done so far in the task force was about to consider these two priorities, identifying possible links in terms of experts from other parts of the corresponding partners, so other organizations in the corresponding partners, to create links with them. And we are defining the roadmap in terms of identifying which are the most important priorities. But I guess that the two that I told you before, so Cybersecurity Resilience Act and electronic ID in these forms specifically of digital identity wallets are probably the two main priorities for the task force for the next time being.
Thank you, Paolo, for the introduction and good points. So I see that some people in the audience have their hand raised. I would ask again, if possible, to write the questions, because due to the time that we have, it would be easier if we can have the questions and then pose them and the speaker can answer instead of entering dialogue, direct dialogue. So I would go, while we wait for some questions, I would go to Stefan and to Gianluca. And in terms of Gianluca, you mentioned, so in terms of your expertise, you mentioned already the alignment that you have been doing in the digital partnership in action and also in other initiatives, so the human-centric AI towards other countries. So what are your, let's say, takeaways for INSTAR? You know, the work that we are doing, in particular on the data part. Paulo spoke about cybersecurity, Antonio IoT, but of course there are other areas. Do you have some initial takeaways for the alignment towards what we call international task forces?
Yes, well, actually, I mean, the work of INSTAR as the other project that were mentioned in DICO, I think are crucial to ensure that exactly the colleagues of the EU institutions and member states actually can, let's say, speak the same language with other countries outside of the EU, and then, of course, supporting the technical work that in the various committees let's say, for standardization is being developed. I mean, if we look at some of the cases that were mentioned already, artificial intelligence, it's, you know, there is a proliferation of committees and discussions in different organizations. Of course, there is a specific request that the European Commission has done to the CEN-CENELEC, as you all know, with the famous 10 questions. And now, of course, how this could be, I mean, will be then integrated or aligned with the work of other international standard development organizations like ISO and the like is also, let's say, a technology diplomacy issue that need to be addressed. And clearly some of the like-minded countries, as we mentioned, Japan, Korea, Singapore, are also through the digital partnerships developing strong cooperation and framework of agreement and standards in different areas. Paolo mentioned the interoperability for digital identity, for the wallet. This is something also we have been supporting the Commission colleagues because there are specific agreements, for example, between the EU and Japan on that were agreed at the last Digital Partnership Council meeting in Brussels, and now there will be the need to develop some use cases. This will also be very, very concrete work. So the difference between the discussion in the global standardization, let's say, fora, and what the Commission is now trying to do with or is doing actually with the digital partnerships is exactly to go more in depth and develop concrete solutions. So that's why the relation with Japan, Korea, Singapore is now being strengthened and will be also with Canada. Now, another element is instead related to the specific experience, as I mentioned, regarding artificial intelligence, because there clearly there's been, let's say, a priority has been the relation with the US through the Trade and Technology Council. So the EU has been working very closely and has been developing, let's say, also a set of common terminology that was very, let's say, instrumental. Then we hope for the further work on the standardization files. So in that we have been supporting the colleagues of the Commission through various experts, and clearly there's been an important advancement in the alignment in that regard. Interoperability is again the key word there for interoperability of AI systems, but of course we are just at the beginning, I would say, so there's still a lot of work to be done, and I believe you that are the experts, this community probably has a lot of work in front of us.
Thank you. So I would pass the token on to Paolo, because we are speaking about AI. We just spoke about AI, and we have the AI Act, of course, and this so that there is a concrete positioning in this context. Also in digital identity, as Paolo mentioned before, there is a digital, let's say, an European regulation and positioning. And this requires some alignment, let's say, across or towards the other regions that we are, worldwide regions that we are working with. So Paolo, in this context, what is your view in terms of this European positioning, the so-called Brussels effect, which maybe you can also explain, and what are, in your opinion, the priorities that INSTAR should be tackling to ensure that this alignment in terms of recommendations, of course, from research towards standardization is feasible?
Okay. I want to talk to you about a success story, an European success story about standardization. Because Europe started regulating digital identity in 1999, so 25 years ago. At that point was a directive, then we had the first version, the ADAS regulation that came up in 2014, now we have the second revision, ADAS 2, in 2024. Europe has been incredibly successful in transforming one of its possible weaknesses in a very strength. Because when it comes to manage digital identity, you have to consider that each country in Europe has its own way. Believe me, they have very different ways to manage digital identity in each country in Europe. And the European Commission cannot dictate how each country manages identities for its citizens. But the European Commission could create a way to have all of these different identities interoperable within them. I'm Italian, I have a digital brand. I think that your mic is open. So if you could check, okay, thanks. Italy, I'm Italian citizen, has its own many different ways to provide digital identity to its citizens. France has a different approach. Each one is a sovereign in its own country, but imagine that I'm an Italian, I have to access data in France. So we need to create an interoperable system that allows me to access a service in France with some security guarantees. That's about considering that I'm an Italian citizen. That was the idea behind the IDAS first edition of the regulation 2014. That also created, among the others, the concept of trust service providers, really regulated them, and created a pan-European framework for interoperability. And in fact, as a result, now you see companies like mine that are like 900 people, not only selling products related to digital identities or signatures in Europe, but outside of Europe. Why this happened? It's not very common for European ICT companies to sell products outside of Europe. We always tend to think that we have these big, giant American companies, corporates. But how it happened? It happened for the so-called Brussels effects that you mentioned, Ruth. Essentially, when the European Union creates some regulation for its market, everyone that wants to sell products in this market has to follow the regulation by definition. So imagine that you are a manufacturer or service provider outside of Europe. Either you decide to sell products in Europe following the European regulation, or you are not in Europe, and you cannot miss the European market. So you have to follow the regulation when you're selling products in Europe. At some point, you have to create economy scale. So, which means that it makes sense for you. Does it make sense for you to have two different products, one for Europe and one for outside of Europe? Probably not. Probably makes sense to have just a single product. So even if we're seeing a product in South America, it could make sense for you to follow the European regulation, because so the European regulation makes the European market immediately accessible for you. And it's totally possible that the regulation in Europe is stricter, but more complete, more updated, more functional than what you could find or not find in other markets. So what happened? It happened that we sell products in Europe about digital identity, okay? But we see countries outside of Europe that continuously are saying us, we like the ADAS model because it's a federation between peers. It's an open model. So are you following ADAS? Perfect. We want your product. And these are resulted for us as a company, for many other companies in this sector, to sell our products based on European standards outside of Europe, in Central America, in South America. You said Japan. Japan has done some experiment in integrating its, sorry for the trusted list, which means who is authorized to say something about me in Japan, with the systems that we have in Europe. Ukraine has done the same. North Africa, for obvious reasons, is interesting what's happening in Europe. Countries that are accessing Europe are doing the same, but also South America, Central America. So this Brussels effect has been extremely successful to project European influence outside of Europe, and to help European companies to sell products outside of Europe. For digital identity, this has been an incredibly successful thing, I have to say, because European companies are world leaders when it comes to manage digital identity and trust services. And you see it is because the UNCITRAL, the United Nations Commission on International Trade, has created a model law, so a possible basic law that each country could decide to customize to adopt, using the concept of trust services. So very successful results from this. And now, today, we have IDAS 2, which builds on this success and says that, okay, we have to create a wallet, a different, decentralized, more privacy-friendly, more user-centric approach to manage data about us, which is a relevant privacy feature. And what we have to do now when it comes to priorities, work on IDAS 2, following the same approach to create interoperable systems. Because if you read what the G20 says in its digital blueprint, they specifically talk about digital wallets. So we have a strong position in the market in Europe, outside of Europe, and we have to consolidate it through the use of standards. Of course, also winning some market share, creating good products, many other things. But for what we are saying now here in this context, creating good standards that have to be interoperable and open, as we did in the past with the others.
Okay, thank you, Paolo. I'm going to pass the token to Antonio, and of course, any of you may comment. Okay, so I'm directing the questions so that our audience can understand a bit better the type of work that we are doing in INSTAR and in the different ETFs. But of course, if one of you wants to add something to what the former speaker said, please let me know. Antonio, in terms of the CEI ETF, what I would ask you is, so you spoke about, let's say, the main actions that the task force is doing, and I would like to ask you if you have already identified major gaps or aspects, let's say, knowledge areas, topics, priorities where there is a strong need for alignment, and with specific countries, if you have already that information.
Okay, so thank you for the question. We use the term continuum, and it's a nice term because it means that we connect things together, okay? And we use the term CEI, which is Cloud Edge IoT. I have to say, when I go to the IoT standardization, I'm not using this term. I'm using the other way around, IoT Edge Cloud, okay? And because IoT is where you create things, you create data, and then you actually have a data pipe which goes into the ecosystems and use AI, data space, and things like that, okay? So actually, the main issue is integration, okay? And continuum is a nice term for that. So from IoT to data space, AI applications, to applications reality, okay, which maybe might use AI. And one of the instruments of the paradigm we are using is something we call digital twin, okay? So, and this is pregnant because actually everyone now in the world is using the term digital twin because it has a very powerful, let's say, abstraction that everyone understands, from the managers to the engineers, okay? And this is also another type of integration, whether we understand the same things together, okay? So this is important. How to make it happen, and how to let's say operationalize this integration. One thing is, first of all, what we call a domain interplay. Actually, we are actually using another term. We often say horizontal, vertical interplay. And in discussing there, actually, it's better to just say domain interplay, but we have several types of domains. You can have application domains, for instance, energy, transport, health. You can have cross-cutting domains such as security, privacy, resilience, that kind of thing. And you have horizontal technology, and we're talking about AI, IoT, DLTs, quantum, virtual worlds, and things like that, okay? And you have even other domains such as smart city. Okay, this is an ecosystem domain, and I would even dare to say that conformity assessment is by itself a domain that is actually completely transversal. Okay, so we need to integrate the whole thing. This is the challenge of the future. In the past, it was sufficient to be specialized and to work on specialization. Now we need to understand this interplay, and we must ensure the integration. Okay. And so in order to do that, well, the solution is what we call, sorry to say, interoperability, okay? So we have to have interoperability of concepts, of architecture, and then of systems, okay? So to get back to concepts, I would say Paolo mentioned the term interoperability of digital wallet. Yes, exactly, this is needed. Actually, we will have to agree on the terms on what we mean by a digital wallet, what we mean by identity management, things like that, okay? And this work is being done. For instance, in SC27, there is a task force, an ad hoc group, working on concept mapping, okay? So they are trying to define what we mean by identity management, things like that. So this is the starting point, because we must understand each other. We must have interoperability of concepts, okay? Another example is SC42 and AI. They have 3 taxonomy projects because, again, we need to understand each other. And the AI, you have now an explosion of new terms, and we need to make sure we understand the same thing, okay? So once you have this, you can start creating architectures. But do we have one unique architecture? No, we have as many architectures as domains. So we have the term reference architecture, and actually in standardization, we're working on that. What do we mean by a reference architecture? And currently, in a nutshell, we say a reference architecture is the thing that is unifying. And then we have patterns. We have things that are specialized, okay? I give you just one example or 2 examples, okay? One is if you go to energy, you are going to use the smart grid architecture model, SCAM, and this is going to be a pattern that only probably the energy domain is using, but still on top you have unifying stuff, okay? The same thing for digital wallet, okay? For the digital wallet, to me, there might be several approaches per regions and things like that. So you could have, again, an architecture pattern. And maybe in some places, we don't use digital wallet, okay? So, and the standardization is about this, is how to get together and allow those things to be possible. We're not saying, please use this unique solution. We're just saying, explain the solution in such a way that we can select them if appropriate.
Thank you, Antonio. So summarizing, we do need, so these are good points for all ETFs in INSTAR, I believe. So we need an alignment in taxonomies on the main terms, so towards interoperability. Then on architectural design, we need some flexibility to be able to accommodate, let's say, different perspectives that we have internationally, and also some alignment in terms of system abstractions that are being used across IoT, Edge, and Cloud. I liked also your comment on IoT Edge Cloud. I have the same comment for CI versus IoT Edge Cloud. This is actually somewhat relevant also for the other aspects, I would say. There are 2 aspects also related with this vision. So in terms, so we are discussing here, let's say, an alignment that we have to do in the European task forces, so that we can bring some useful inputs to work together with our geographical counterparts. So this, the so-called roadmaps that the ETFs are being drafted with priorities towards standardization. And Antonio gave us some. I would ask Gianluca and Paolo. So I don't know who wants to start first. How do you see this? And in terms of the data part and also the cybersecurity EID part, if you have the same view.
Maybe briefly, and then Paolo is more expert than me on this. But again, I believe that there is I mean a twofold let's say need, in the sense on one side there is the technical aspect, the need definitely to be let's say addressed, and more in-depth cooperation at that level. Then there are also other more soft, let's say, kind of alignment that need to be, let's say, addressed. So, for instance, I give you an example. We are supporting the European Union for some activities that the EU delegation, in particular in Japan, is doing in November for a full week of training and capacity building in the area of cybersecurity. And this is a work that has been done already for some time, involving Japan, the EU, and the United States. This, you know, this kind of collaboration, this kind of work, it's fundamental also exactly to build the same, let's say, understanding of the needs, of the challenges, and then exchanges, cooperation, and knowledge. At the same time, in the same week, there are also the cyber games that are happening in Japan. Again, this follows a series of other activities that has been done at the international level. There was recently in Turin the European cyber game competition, and so these activities, and there we are also supporting the team of all female cyber players that the EU has been selected to compete on this. Now, of course, the scope of and the purpose of this is also to build the next generation of cyber security experts, and of course already bear in mind the need to have this international cooperation in aspects. So I think these kind of activities are important and complement then the work that is done at the regulatory and technical level.
Thank you, Gianluca. Paolo?
Oh, I say that I concur with, and I see some interesting inputs both from Gianluca and Antonio. Elaborating a bit on what Gianluca has just said, I like this idea of, let's say, soft and hard skills, concepts, tools, whatever. So there are two ways to do that. Because one point, which is more on the soft side, is that we have to create some kind of political interest and alignment in doing this kind of thing. Because standardization does not work because we have 5 people closed in a room deciding something for the other, but when some kind of political understanding that what they're doing is relevant. They could continue to be 5 people in a room, that's no problem, but who are they representing is important for this work. And from this point of view, if you think to all the field of expertise that INSTAR is covering, there is a strong political understanding at the highest level that these things are important. About artificial intelligence, needless to say, okay. About cybersecurity, I repeat, it's clear to everyone that now we live in a world that is back structured in blocks, one facing the other. So cybersecurity is no longer an option. Electronic identification, digital identity are things relevant when you have to do with international commerce, as an example. Giving digital identity to everyone in the world is one of the sustainable development goals of the United Nations organization. Because today in the world, we have more than 1 billion people without identity. If you don't have identity, you don't have access to medical records, properties, bank accounts, education, and so on and so forth. This is for the soft part. The hard part is still that having these 5 people in the room write standards. As Sonia said, clearly there's not a need to agree on many things. He made an interesting example about the ad hoc group on mapping the concept of digital identity in the context of ISO SC27, which is a very, very big group about cybersecurity, okay? And this clearly is not a simple work to do, because doing standardization is difficult. Doing standardization of this level is even more difficult. because you are the world leader, only just travel takes a lot of time. Okay, I could do from personal experience with the point. And from this, clearly, what is important, what we say that the European Union has already started doing other projects that I like to say here, to cite here, is that they fund people working on these activities, paying for the travel costs, for the personal costs or whatever. You are not making money out of this is not the process. But especially if you are a small, medium company, you feel that this is important. I want to say this to our audience, that you feel that you could give a contribution to this and you feel that it's important, in your own interest to do that, I advise you to check these kind of support programs that are funded by the European Union that helps you in doing that. Okay, especially for small, medium company, clearly, even just paying costs for travel in the other part of the world could be relevant. So if these costs are subsidized, this is very good for them. And this is clearly is more on the hard part of work when at the end of the day you have to write a standard. Okay, not so say that they're political alignment because there is need to a standard, but the standard has to be written. That's the point.
Okay, thank you, Paolo. So we spoke about, let's say, key guiding principles in terms of the different ETFs. So one question to you all now, going not to alignment, but we are trying to do harmonization and alignment and finding ways to do so, as Antonio mentioned. So do you see any significant risks of fragmentation in this context while we are trying to do the alignment at an international level, so our next step? And do you have some, let's say, recommendations that INSTAR should take there?
Yeah, maybe I can step in.
Yes.
So my view is that we have a huge problem of integration. Okay, so not only Europe but worldwide. Okay, and we want to share approaches, yet allowing any let's say domains and solutions to be specific, because we also want competition, innovation, and things like that. So how do we make sure that overall, say, it's a cross-cutting thing, such as we mentioned privacy and things like that. So in Europe, we have all the, let's say, legislation. So of course, we started in the past with GDPR. We have the AI Act has been accepted. Then we have the Cyber Resilience Act underway, the Data Act, and so-called harmonized standards. Okay, how do we make sure? Conformity assessment. Okay, so we need to have conformity assessment of those things. Okay, and of course there are programs that are doing it, standardization and things like that. But look at each individual conformity assessment need. It's huge. So if you add them up, so if, let's say, if a cost of conformity assessment, okay, for instance, cybersecurity is a few percent, this is acceptable. If you have 10 topics, that's 30%. It's just exploding. So the major, let's say, challenge is reusability of conformity assessment. So agile conformity assessment, okay? So we don't want to have 30% of our costs in conformity assessment, but maybe 5%, 6%. So one of the important things is to make sure that we have standards and things like that on agile conformity assessments. Fortunately, in standardization, there are a number of actions currently ongoing. I'm involved in several of them, but I don't want to get into the details. But this is definitely one of the most important, let's say, challenge to take into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Gianluca?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Antonio said about the need exactly to harmonize and have a better understanding also of the impact then of certain regulatory, let's say, certain regulations, certain laws, legal instruments. I mean, here it was mentioned before also the Draghi report that also, in fact, make reference to the need to simplify maybe certain regulations, including the GDPR, and maybe need to have let's say, an assessment after some years, and that's also to avoid overlaps between different regulations and regulatory frameworks. So these are already in Europe when it comes, for example, to artificial intelligence or the other, let's say, instruments. Then there is, of course, the need to bring to the technical level also the discussion and the political debate. It's also there that need to be somehow translated into something very concrete and agile that will not be, let's say, a barrier to our SMEs, for example, in Europe. And then there is the need to have this global discussion on the various topics. So I believe the harmonization, as you say, the alignment, and also the political, let's say, understanding are fundamental for this to be, let's say, advanced.
Thank you, Gianluca. Paul?
Oh, about fragmentation, I could cite what once Andrew Tannenbaum famously said. He said that the good thing about standards is that there are so many to choose from. So there is not just a single standard, there are so many. This clearly could be a fragmentation problem. And another thing I could cite, I think is relevant to the discussion, is something that I heard some months ago by Daniel Fett, someone else, said that when he was a young person working on standardization, he heard from a very old expert saying that the standards are about making choices that do not matter. So this means that, and this common sense, you see this in the European regulation, because I will start from this. If you look as an example, the European regulation about electronic ledgers, so blockchains and distributed ledgers, essentially, that in Europe are called electronic ledgers to be technological agnostic. The regulation is somehow simple. It's not a very high barrier. On the contrary, it's very low. And this makes a lot of sense because you are creating a new market somehow. So what Europe tries to do is usually to write the minimum amount of conditioning on the market, but with some effects on the market. Otherwise, there's no need to write the law. And this is somehow the approach, I think, the common sense, the good sense that have to follow when it comes to avoid fragmentation in this area. It's better clearly to have something that is applied by everyone in the world, even if it be either somehow more general, even more simple, whatever, than trying to push things too much and resulting in people that are not sure to adopt the standard, because at the end of the day, you're talking with sovereign countries, so no one is forced to follow what you're saying. That's the point. On the contrary, try to be as much possible as open, which means understanding the differences. I repeat, in my field of digital identity over identity is a cultural thing. So don't think that the way that two persons in two different countries the world think about identity is the same. It cannot be the same. So we have to translate this into standard. We have to be very open-minded. That's the point. You have to try to avoid any kind of fragmentation, because otherwise someone will come up with another standard. As simple as that. And you have to consider that some good lessons have been learned from what has happened in the IDAS development during the last, 25 years. So it's not obvious to have a piece of legislation that is 25 years old in the sense that has been continuously updated in the last quarter of century. That's it.
Thank you, Paolo. So I still don't see any questions from the audience. I would just say that we have 7 minutes to go. So if there is some question, please write them now in the questions and answers. I have a final question to the three of you. We discussed, let's say, alignment. You spoke also about lessons learned based on other initiatives. We spoke about fragmentation. So the final question is, let's suppose we do our very nice roadmaps and we are now discussing them with the international experts. How can we measure the impact of these initiatives? So what do you think we should do in terms of assessing the impact of the roadmaps that we are proposing to do for harmonization? So I would start with Antonio.
I'm not sure I have a good answer on that, but definitely we need to measure the impact. And so let me share my experience is that if I was able to measure the impact of something, I would be very rich in my undertaking on business. Okay, so but we can see sign of let's say people moving towards some activities, and maybe this is the market. Okay, and in particular when it comes to standardization, again I have to say when we see that conformity assessment standards are being discussed, then something must happen, okay? And in particular, I saw this in SC 27, cybersecurity and privacy protection, where there are lots of people discussing on cybersecurity, how we organizational cybersecurity of information system, how do we do the conformity assessment. The same for privacy. In automotive, there is a requirement from the United Nations for vehicle homologation that all manufacturers must be, let's say, certified against cybersecurity, and so then you see the whole thing in action. Okay, and I would say regulation is helping a lot going into this direction, and when you see that people in the conformity assessment are working on this, probably you see a sign that the market is starting. Okay, I'm not sure whether it's a good answer, but that's my best answer.
It's a good answer because it allows us to also position, okay, what we feel would be success once we finish INSTAR. So Gianluca, go ahead. We have around 4 minutes. Okay, I would ask you both to be short.
Yeah, no, very briefly, but I mean, and I don't want to appear naive, but or maybe I mean too topic, but I mean, in principle, because we know that this, let's say, standard debates are also, trying to show the muscles, of different organizations, different countries, different ideas. So I think if we really instead try to put this away, and we, I mean, the final impact, the ultimate objective of having standards is to facilitate the life of citizens and the businesses, and of course also then try to put the key values of our society in discussion, and of course promote them. So for instance, the European Union has advanced a strategy for strengthening the European standardizations back in 2022 that exactly focus on this. So how we can promote the European values, the good governance, the democratic principles that we have at the core of our society. And that goes also through the need of exchanging practices, exactly as it was said before, beyond the walls of a small room. Education and capacity building become then fundamental, raising awareness, and then of course the technical aspect of this. Now also, going back, this requires then this fragmentation that was mentioned before. It's overcome, because this is our main weakness. I mean, we don't have yet a common European approach, and we still need to work on that. That's why these projects are so important, but also we should have a more coordination and cooperation between the many activities that the EU is supporting or member states are also doing. So again, a lot of work, but very important, challenging, but also very much needed.
Thank you, Gianluca. Paolo, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I was considering just one, so okay, I'm rich. Okay, but very, very simple. Clearly, the best thing, the best metric that you could have, the more effective is the number of standards that you are creating resulting from this action. The problem is that drafting a standard, usually takes many years, 2, 3, if you are the fast kind of person, okay, let's say. And so the time frame of this initiative, like INSTAR, could not be totally compatible with this. So to see this at an upper level, from the point of view of the European Commission, generally speaking, I would say, what is important is that these kind of initiatives are funded continuously. It should not be just one of a kind to see what happens. Okay, it could be the first one, like INSTAR, to get some ideas on how to structure the following. This is the important point, because we have accepted the idea that developing standard takes time. They are inexorable in the sense that once you have developed a standard, it's difficult to escape from it, unless you find another one, as I said before, but they take a lot of time. And this is something that you have to consider when it comes to evaluating the result of any of these initiatives. Because the time frame is not the typical time frame of European project, which is usually 2 to 3 years.
Right.
While standard is 3 to 5. That's the point.
Okay, so in that case, I think that having a standards tracer like the one that is being developed in INSTAR and following what was done in Stand ICT is crucial in this context, because it helps us also in measuring what will happen in the next years. So I thank you all for participating in the panel. And so we are now closing the panel, and I pass the token to Brendan and to Tanya from LUSPEX. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for the really insightful questions and for your answers, Antonio, Paolo, and Gianluca. So we're unfortunately out of time. We do have a summary that we're going to be sharing with everyone, but maybe just to recap on a few things. So first of all, on the digital partnerships, the digital partnerships is the main tool for the EU to collaborate on standardisation priorities and use cases with international partners. And the difference between those and global international fora is that the EU will be focusing on building tangible and actionable solutions, and also making the most of what is now known as a Brussels effect, so where there are regulations that determine how technologies are going to be used and the way they should be adopted, but that is becoming the gold standard for other world regions also to follow. Specifically on EIDAS, the EU's put a lot of energy into two digital priorities, the digital product passport and the digital identity wallet. And again, this builds on the Brussels effect to build in a more user-friendly approach to managing digital identity and data. And in fact, this is a microcosm, I think, of some of the technologies that we're exploring through INSTAR. So it might involve, or it's very likely to involve cybersecurity. It definitely involves data, but eventually it's also going to be involving some of the quantum technologies. So post-quantum cryptography is going to be very much something that's going to be linked to digital identity. On AI, IoT, cloud to edge, I think that's that we've just decided that it should be not CEI but ICE, which is possibly even better for social media and for catchiness. But we're seeing here that there is a need for a greater interoperability even between concepts and between technologies, and those are going to be we're going to have to push and drive that discussion at international level. More strategically, the DPA is supporting the EU in activities for Japan this November, so that's really interesting. We'll be providing further feedback, two-way feedback on that in the future. But this is really one of the building blocks that are needed to achieve political understanding. So that more political and more strategic vision is something that within INSTAR and filtering through into the task forces, but also the international task forces, that's something that we always try to keep in mind. That's the backdrop of the conversations that we're having with these partners. We're definitely facing challenges in integration globally, and the more we can share approaches, the more that we can open dialogue on approaches, and where we can not just push our Eurocentric views, but also understand the views of those other partners, the better we're going to be able to reach collaboration and achieve ultimate resiliency and an environment in which these technologies can serve the interests of citizens globally, not just in the EU. The Draghi report here recommends simplifying EU regulations because there is overlap at the moment, and that overlap results in not just additional cost to business, but also the legal uncertainty, and that is not good because it means that innovators will take a back seat. They won't actually go ahead and invest or explore all of the possibilities that these new technologies are bringing to the market and to society for fear of being in breach of regulation. So that's also something that we really need to consider. And I think the final takeaway from your last question, Ruth, and from our panelists, is that there is no common European approach, which is why INSTAR in particular is important. And again, the ultimate goal of establishing standards is to simplify the lives of citizens and businesses and uphold key values. And that's what we're here all to do. We want to strengthen our standardization system and promote these values, as I say, globally, but also understanding what other regions, you know, that there may be cultural differences, and so far as we're able to understand those and to find a common approach, then that's going to be better for us, not just geopolitically, but all of us globally. Here, education and capacity building are going to be absolutely key. And of course, dissemination. So to those of you that are still here, thank you so much for attending and for being with us throughout just over an hour now. And please do keep in contact. We will be releasing a very brief report with some of these highlights, and we'll make sure that you get those. To my colleagues, Sarah and Luigi, thank you so much for your hard work in getting everything together. Thank you again. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.